we've worked it out.
This land is your land. This land is mine. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
Do you like to ask questions about everything? Would you like to escape from your proverbial box? Just leap out and explore our world in ways you've never imagined?
Oh, I know what he's doing. Good evening, everyone. This is Bessa Farhad, host of the People Speak Show. When the people speak, we make a difference, and you have an opportunity for on this show for ordinary people to reach out to people with extraordinary stories. Our guests tonight are Craig and Cindy Corey, the parents of the late Rachel Corey. Rachel was an American member of the International Solidarity Movement who traveled as an activist to the Gaza Strip during the Al-Aqsa Intifada. She was killed when she tried to obstruct an Israeli Defense Forces Caterpillar D9 bulldozer as it was headed towards the Palestinian residential area in Rafah near the border with Egypt. The circumstances behind Rachel's death are highly disputed. The ISM say that the driver of the bulldozer deliberately ran her over twice while she was trying to prevent a house demolition. Yet the official Israeli government reports and the IDF indicated that factors contributing to Rachel's death included falling debris pushed over by the bulldozer, that the bulldozer driver did not see her, that the bulldozer was clearing brush and not engaged in demolition, and that Rachel was interfering with security operations designed to uncover the tunnels used by Hamas and other groups for smuggling weapons from Egypt. These are the many stories that you've heard, I'm sure, Cindy and Craig. First of all, welcome to the People Speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. For me, as an American of Palestinian ancestry, it is an honor to have you here. Before we get into some of the details of the events that led to Rachel's ultimate death, can you tell us briefly, Craig and Cindy, what was Rachel like outside of her activism?
Well, I think she was like most young women anywhere in the world, certainly a West Coast American girl. So as a grade schooler through high school and in fact into college, she liked to play soccer as amateur soccer or football to the international people. She was interested in music, particularly in her younger years in high school. She loved in middle school, grade school, high school. She loved ballet and certainly worked hard at her ballet. I think Rachel was a fun person. She had a great sense of humor and loved to tease her father. So I don't know, Cindy, you have things you want to add about her? I think she was somebody that always brought joy to us whenever she showed up. You know, I can think about her coming around the corner to have dinner with us in downtown Olympia, and the smile that she would have on her face, and we would have on ours at seeing her.
Rachel was the youngest of our 3 children. She was 5 years younger than her sister and 7 years younger than her brother. So she was a gift, you know, to the 4 of us. And I always say that when she came through the door, I think we all kind of waited for her to come through the door because she had such a unique way of looking at the world. She had great wit and humor, and there was a playfulness about Rachel. There was a very serious side to Rachel as well, and she was a very human person. She had her ups and downs like kids do as they're growing up. But there was a very playful and caring side of her. I think she had a real gift for relating to many different kinds of people. She was very skilled at listening. Now, because a lot of her words have become familiar to people through her writings from Gaza, and also through a play that's been created about her. People think about and know something about all of the words that were floating around in her mind. But when you were with her, she had a really great ability to listen as well as to talk. And I think that was one of her real gifts. As a teenager, she worked here with a group. It was called the Teen Care Line, which is a crisis line in our community. So teenagers would call up, and Rachel would take their calls if they were having some problem and try to refer them to whatever support they might need. When she was a senior in high school, she was actually allowed to take calls from adults. She had a lot of training. She was very skilled at that, and so she was added to the adult crisis line. She worked. Work was really important to her. As I said, she was the youngest of our three kids. The other kids, we helped them all through college, but for Rachel, I think that she just felt she needed to ground herself in some work of her own. It was a way of becoming her own person and becoming independent. She spent a year working for the Washington State Conservation Corps, building roads in Olympic National Park, doing some really kind of interesting jobs, picking up garbage in Mount Rainier National Park.
Pretty much an activist just from the get-go.
Well, people asked that about her, and I remember soon after she was killed, somebody asked us that, and we said, no, she was just our kid. But then we were reminded that, she went to a school here in Olympia. It's called the Lincoln Options Program. It's in the public school system, but it's an alternative elementary school program that tries to connect children to the world. Craig and I were part of the founding parent group for that school, and it was very important to us that our children, that they connect to the community. And then part of that was to see the world as your community as well. So Rachel came through that. Some people have seen a video of her when she was 10 years old giving a speech at our state capitol here in Olympia on world hunger. And that was really a project of her fifth grade class. They were studying world hunger, and then they decided they could do something about it. So they did a press conference locally at the same time that I believe it was in the UN that the report on the state of the world's children was being presented, and that's a little bit of the kind of background that she had. And
sounds like a remarkable young lady, Cindy, and Craig. You have a lot to be proud of. Let me ask you, how did she get involved with the ISM and the Palestinian issue?
Well, after 9/11, I think Rachel tried to make some sense out of that, and so she started to study the situation. She also decided to become a peace activist at that time. And so in Olympia here at the Evergreen State College, where she was going to school, some of the people, some of her friends and the people that she met there, I had been active and gone to Palestine, part of the Freedom Summer with ISM in 2002. So Rachel had friends that had been there. She had one particular friend that had gone to Rafah, and so she became interested in that. And I think as she studied these issues, she became aware that the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian lands was one of the, I think, the sore points that sort of has infected the rest of our world relations, and certainly the Middle East. So she felt that that was crucial. Of course, this was before U.S. had invaded and occupied Iraq. So anyway, she decided to learn more, and she started taking Arabic classes, and she determined that she was going to go and see for herself, and she decided she wanted to go to Rafah as being perhaps one of the most forgotten places in the most forgotten place in the world.
Yeah, it absolutely was an incredible tragedy. It is definitely a tragedy. You know, let me ask you, Cindy and Craig, you know, here as we read the different reports surrounding that tragic day, I mean, could the Israeli reports get any more varied and differing? I mean, falling debris, the bulldozer driver didn't see her, they were clearing brush, they were, you know, she was interfering in security effort. Which one was it?
Yeah, I think that was one of the sort of emotionally upsetting things to me, is that when you see the different stories that came out early on, particularly from the Israeli government, it was sort of like a Saturday Night Live sketch, you know, and it reminded me, I'm probably saying too much about my childhood, but how poorly I lied as a 7-year-old. You know, when your stories just really wouldn't make any sense to your mother, and how maybe by the time you were 11, you know, if no matter what happened, if they wanted, if they didn't see her, or if they simply wanted to lie about not being able to see her, you would think that somebody would say, we didn't see her, and we're very sorry. And you know, where a lot of people, I can say that I'm clearly visible to somebody, but I really can't say that that person sees me. But that's not what they did. I had a conversation, for instance, with Ed McEwen, who was, at the time Rachel was killed, the U.S. Consul General to Israel, and he said in the first briefing he was told that a wall fell on Rachel while they were doing bulldozer operations.
Yes, I've heard that too. I've heard a number of stories other than these.
Yeah, and then in the second briefing, then they came back with the IDF came back with a PowerPoint presentation saying that they weren't doing any, they hadn't destroyed any houses that day, weren't doing anything against houses, and Rachel died by tripping on the rubble, or perhaps something falling on her, and definitely the bulldozer never touched her. And he asked at that time, well, why did you say a wall fell on Rachel if you weren't even pushing on walls or doing anything like that? And he said their answer was that the International Solidarity Movement told them that. And the Consul General said to me, he said, of course they didn't tell them that. And what's more, in the first briefing, he said, they didn't tell me they think or they're told that Rachel was killed by a wall falling. They said she was killed by a wall falling. So what all that told me, unfortunately, is it just seemed like what happened to Rachel was just a day at the office for the people in the Israeli military there. It wasn't worth, they didn't expect anybody to ask enough questions to find an answer or look into it carefully enough to have answers that would hold water.
And the fact that she was an American citizen didn't upset the cart at all, Craig?
Well, apparently not.
Yes, somebody was saying about it, there was a play. Were you able to, both of you, see the play? And what did you think of it?
We have seen the play. There actually are a lot of creative things that have come out of Rachel's story, which I think our family, to the extent that we've had an opportunity to support those, we have, because there just are a lot of people from around the world that were very moved by Rachel's story, were impacted by it, and have taken it and then found responses to it. And to me, that's a very heartening, positive thing. And there have been couple of different theater things that have happened, but the one that we're most familiar with and that we've actually spent a lot of time being involved with is the play My Name is Rachel Corrie. And it was first in London in April of 2005. It had a very successful run there at the Royal Court Theatre, in their upstairs theatre. That is a very small venue. It was a very intimate, wonderful space to see the play. It's a one-woman show. Megan Dodds was the actress really for quite a long time with the show, for about a period of 2 years. She did it again in October of 2005 when the play, because of the success that it had in London, moved to the Royal Court's downstairs theater, which seated 400 people. It got wonderful reviews and awards. It's an interesting story how the play developed. When Rachel was killed on the day, on March 16th, when we heard the news, Craig and I were in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were living at the time in an apartment. I had been in Washington, D.C. the week before for a women's march on Washington. It was right before the Iraq War was beginning. And so we were sort of just picking things up around the apartment from having had a busy week. Craig was off doing laundry at our laundry place, and a call came from my son-in-law, who was here in Olympia, and he asked to speak to Craig. I could tell there was something wrong by the tone of his voice and asked him why, and he said they'd had very sad news. And then I could hear my daughter Sarah crying, and they had been having breakfast out here when the phone, the message machine on their phone kicked in, and an old friend left a message saying that she was so sorry about the tragedy and that she had heard about it on television. And Sarah tried to think what that could be, and then thought, if it's on TV, it has to be Rachel. And they went to the television, and running across on the channel that they actually just turned it on to was a strip saying Olympia woman killed in the Gaza Strip. And at that point, when Sarah was talking to me on the phone, Kelly went back to the television and then came back and said, by that time it said Rachel Corrie of Olympia, Washington, killed in the Gaza Strip.
I can't even imagine what a horrific experience that must have been. Our heart goes out to you, and I know the people in our virtual auditorium are also just devastated by the sadness of it. Let me ask you, Cindy, what is the current status of the investigation of Rachel's death? Or is there even an investigation of Rachel's death according to the Israeli government?
There was a military police investigation of Rachel's killing that occurred in 2003. In some ways, we got much farther initially than certainly most Palestinians got. There's almost no investigation of the civilian Palestinian deaths that occur. But at the end of, when we got the report in May of 2003, we were told that the IDF found no fault, not even any regulations broken or anything, that the case was closed, no charges would be brought, and at that time they declined to release their report to the U.S. government. We were working with the State Department at the time. They said that they would go to work. Two people subsequently from the American Embassy were permitted to read the report. They found and cited numerous inconsistencies and wrote a memorandum about it. Later that year in August, Craig and I were able to go to the consulate, the Israeli consulate in San Francisco, and were permitted to read the report as well. And then a couple of years later, some more family members were able to read it at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. But the report itself has still never been released to the U.S. government, which to me is quite remarkable.
Well, as a Palestinian, none of that is remarkable to me. Let me ask you, given the circumstances of your daughter's death, the fact that she was a peace activist, gone there just to help somehow lighten the burden of the Palestinians' suffering, how does it make you feel that our government is still supporting Israel so deeply and so entrenched in the support of the Israeli occupation, as well as the the attack on Lebanon, all of these things that, where people are dying daily. What thoughts go through your mind, you and Craig? I'm just curious what you feel.
Well, we've come, of course, through Rachel, we were brought to this issue. We've visited in Israel and Palestine, both in the West Bank and Gaza now 2 times. Because of the position that we're in, I think we've been able to see quite a lot when we've been there. And, of course, we've connected to Palestinians all over the world now. And to many other people who care about this issue, to Israelis who care about this issue and are passionate about the wrongfulness of what's happening as well. I think, it's been really shocking to us in many ways, and in our work with the U.S. government and so forth, to see not only in the situation related to Rachel, but in all aspects of this, that there is such imbalance in how we approach the situation, that there is continuing funding and support for human rights violations, for selling equipment that are used for in human rights violations and to infringe on international law and so forth. To us, this has become one of the major things, is to try to convey to Americans what our involvement is, what our responsibility is, and how damaging that is, not only to Israelis and to Palestinians, but to how Americans are viewed in the world.
Craig, how do you feel about this unending and continuous support it was just really an aggressor nation on a smaller nation of people that basically did nothing but live in the wrong place at the wrong time for 60 years?
Well, of course, the Palestinians were living there long before 60 years ago, but I think that, a lot of people talk about, and it gets demanded of us to have balance when we talk about this thing, and of course, the balance, the people usually that are asking for that don't understand where the imbalance is. That, as you point out, our support is so totally on the side of Israel. And as Cindy points out, it then is support of human rights violations. So I think that we need to go back and look at international law, and international law that's been included in U.S. law by treaty, and it's also been included in Israeli law. And that gives us a framework from which to go forward, I think. I don't think it's up to either me or, in fact, the U.S. government to try to find a solution, in a sense, to enforce, I guess, a solution in the Middle East, but we certainly have to be in a position to protect human rights and to support the individuals that are living there. And we don't do that at this point. It angered me, for instance, last summer to hear our government who would say that Israel has a right to protect itself, and they hope that Israel does that with restraint. And those words are true. Israel does have a right to protect itself, and I certainly would hope they do so with restraint. But it's also true of Palestinians. It's also true of the Lebanese. And when you only hear it said about one people, it's not a call for restraint. I think it's clearly the word for being unrestrained. And of course, even our Secretary of State within a few days was saying that Israel should not stop the bombing of Lebanon, and that's just it's incredibly egregious.
During that time, Condoleezza Rice's statement was that we don't want to get involved. We don't want to, because we want a permanent ceasefire. I said, well, you haven't had a ceasefire in 60 years. What makes you think you're going to have one real soon? And during that time, what is the right time to stop killing people? Probably the right time to stop killing people, as far as I can see.
Precisely, and of course I had in some ways.
Being a Palestinian ancestry.
But I guess I'd point out there have been partial ceasefires, and at the time that Israel started again essentially invading into the Gaza Strip, Hamas, that we were holding, U.S. was holding in such contempt, had a unilateral ceasefire in effect. And so there have been a number of places where it seems to me the United States has missed wonderful chances to work constructively in the area, and they simply passed it up.
Well, I think that the intention is much larger, obviously. I mean, I hate to sound like there's some interesting conspiracy going on, but in fact there is. I believe that the objective is not to have peace. Let me ask you, as a Palestinian, I know that there was it was almost like a double-edged sword when it came to Rachel's death. On the one hand, we thought, oh my God, of course the tragedy is beyond anything. We know the tragedy. We see the tragedy. We see the children dying in Palestine daily. We see, and the sad thing is that this is not the first peace activist that's been harmed or killed in that region. That was the other thing. And we thought to ourselves, well, okay, this is an American citizen. Perhaps the Americans will see the truth now. And what happened? They didn't. And, well, not enough. That's not true either, because a lot of them did. But, oh my God, it was like an overwhelming set. It was almost like they don't care about Rachel. How can they possibly care about Palestinians?
Well, I think one thing about Rachel is that she was very much there to try to work in the background with Palestinians. In a lot of ways, she would have been very uncomfortable with the amount of attention that she has already gotten. But I think it's simply tragic that the Palestinian deaths and injuries and so forth are very invisible to Americans. We have a booklet that we take with us. It's called Remember These Children. And in fact, at Rachel's memorial service, we had the pages of it enlarged, and we had in front of the auditorium where a couple thousand people gathered, actually, these photos of the Israeli and Palestinian children that had been killed since the beginning of the Second Intifada. When we showed that booklet to Rachel's congressman, Brian Baird, he almost got angry at us because he said, where are the Israeli children? Where are the Israeli kids? And then Craig calmly pointed out that Israeli children were killed in suicide bombings and that they were mostly clustered together for the most part. And he turned to a page where there had on a day indeed been a suicide bombing and there were Israeli children killed, sadly. But you could almost see his face go ashen when he looked at the page after page after page of Palestinian children who had been killed during the Intifada long before an Israeli child was killed or harmed, and then how many Palestinian children were included, how many Palestinian children had died during this time. Of course, every single one of those deaths is a tragedy. I don't think anybody our family certainly understands the pain that every family, Israeli and Palestinian, feel at those losses. But I think that our congressman's response was very typical in that people here are very aware when suicide bombings were happening. Fortunately, we haven't seen many of those recently, but when they were happening, we heard about them. But the deaths of Palestinian children are pretty invisible still to Americans and to all civilians, not just children.
Well, what is the work that you and Craig would like to see happen in honor of Cindy's name? I'm sorry, in honor of Rachel's name, Cindy.
Oh, that's an enormous question. Our work, our personal work goes in so many directions now, and it all feels very important to me, which is one of the reasons I don't get too much sleep sometimes. But for others who are out there, I think that maybe the most important thing is to not give in to any feeling of powerlessness around this issue. I just know that there's so much work to be done, and it can be done in a lot of different ways. It's very hard to be strategic sometimes and figure out what's most important, and I think we have to stop and do that. But I believe that it takes all of it. So I'll just give you a few examples of some things that we've done, and I think a lot of the times it is just making up your mind that you're going to do something.
I don't want to shorten this issue because I think it's so important, Cindy. If you'll give us a moment, and we're going to be taking a break, and then we'll continue on this line of this question as soon as we return, and you can tell us what's going on with the Rachel Corrie Foundation and the other work that you're doing.
Great.
Right now you can call in our listening audience at 800-877-786-0562. And you can actually talk and ask questions of Cindy and Craig Corrie. Or you can raise your hand in our virtual auditorium and ask questions, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, folks.
This is Pete Seeger. What country comes to mind when you hear this? The government illegally spies on civilians, produces phony news reports. People are imprisoned without charge or access to a lawyer. Prisoners are tortured and killed, and an illegal war launched on the basis of lies, in which illegal weapons are used against civilians, against journalists and hospitals. Unfortunately, the United States government is behind these actions. Fortunately, our Constitution has a remedy. It's called impeachment. Ask your Congressmember to impeach George Bush and Dick Cheney. This message is sponsored by AfterDowningstreet.org.
Hi, this is James Arthur Yanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio, inviting you to join me on the road to truth via the path of non-contradiction. Join us each week on Feet to the Fire, a show with the goals of examining a subject matter on its own merits and test how it stands up to the many possibilities found in reality. All without pre-drawn conclusions found in personal bias. No left or right wings here. No pounding the pulpit of ego-driven my way or the highway attitudes. But there are no free passes given either. Answers to questions are important, but equally important is the reasons and methods used to find the answer. The lack of contradiction is the final judge here on Feet to the Fire. Feet. Sunday evenings. How do you listen? Fire. www.feet2fire.com for more information.
Why don't you do it, you? Do all the things we know. Won't you stand up for truth? Why won't you turn away too?
Get your dose of truth with the Truth Hurts radio show with your host Charles Giuliani, Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. The Truth Hurts. Ignorance kills.
Why don't you do it, you?
This land is yours.
Join host Basima Farhat on The People Speak as she interviews guests from the realm of politics, activism, spirituality, science, and entertainment. That's Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern on The People Speak, an audience interactive program where your voice counts.
This land was made for you and me.
The Unabridged Universe. Join us from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time. Saturdays as host Jason Wilson and I, Victoria Rose, bring you the perspectives of guests on every topic, from extraterrestrials on the edge of the galaxy to issues that affect you right here at home. It's a big universe out there, and we're likely to cover anything. Do you have any topics that you'd like to have discussed? Know any researchers or free thinkers out there you'd like to have on the show? Log on to www.unabridgeduniverse.com and let us know, only on the Paranormal Radio Network.
This land is your land. This land is mine. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being with us this evening on the People Speak Radio Show. Our guests tonight are the parents of Rachel Corrie, Craig, and Cindy Corrie. Hello, folks. How are you? Thank you. We have, again, I'm going to put out the number, if anybody would like, before we go ahead with the questioning, 877-786-0562 is a toll-free number to call into our live radio audience. And for those in our Pal Talk virtual auditorium, please raise your hands and get your questions ready. We'll take as many as we can. But before we do that, I do want to get back to our talking about the work that you're doing with the Rachel Corrie Foundation. Cindy and Craig, could you please elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Sure. We started the foundation, actually got the beginnings of it going soon after Rachel was killed. We were inspired by Linda Beale, whose daughter was killed in South Africa, registering voters for the first election there when everyone could vote. And we met Linda a couple weeks after Rachel was killed and learned about what her family had done in response to their daughter's killing. And people at the time were asking us about things that they might be able to do to help remember Rachel. And so this foundation kind of evolved from that. Our work is varied. We have four goals really to build connections across local and global communities and lines. We work for peace through education and do a lot of that here in our own community, but also try to support it happening in other places. We try to support work for peace and justice at the grassroots level, and also to do it through the use of art and the written word, because those were things that were so important to Rachel. And our focus, of course, has been at this time Israel and Palestine. Rachel had a lot of interest in, and so we kind of have kept the door open for there to be other things that we would work on at some time. But as we look at the world right now, it certainly seems like the Middle East and Israel-Palestine will be our focus for a very long while because the need is so great. Last year we had an inaugural PeaceWorks conference here in Olympia, which happened in April. It was very successful, drew people from all across the country and even some international guests. We brought speakers from Israel and Palestine, including Diana Butu, Amira Haas, Mustafa Barghouti was here, plus a lot of people who are doing work from throughout the United States had a chance to gather in workshops and to network. And it was a very diverse group of people that came together, and I think that was one of the strengths of this conference. We're doing a PeaceWorks event again this year. It's different this year with a somewhat different focus. We're going, the play, My Name is Rachel Corrie, is opening at the Seattle Repertory Theater. It's a big deal here because people have been waiting. Rachel was from the Northwest, and people have been waiting to have the play come. And it's finally going to be here. And there's a new actress from Seattle who's learned the role, so it's going to be a new experience for us, too. But the play is also coming to the Evergreen State College at the end of April. This is the college where Rachel attended. We'll be participating in our foundation in helping to organize talkbacks, which are talks and conversations that happen after the play and events around the play. We also, some of you may be familiar with the book Voices of a People's History, which is edited by Howard Zinn and Anthony Arnold. And I participated in some readings from that book. One of Rachel's emails is in the book. These are very, very powerful events in which the actual source documents from people who tell some of the alternative history that you don't always read about in our history books are being told in this book. And in these events, different activists, diverse groups of activists read from them, and I've participated in several. They're very powerful gatherings for people to just hear how throughout our history there were people like Rachel and like activists today who stood up when they saw that things weren't quite right. So we're going to do one of those events here in Olympia and probably also in Tacoma nearby, and we're looking forward to all of that.
Like quite a load on you, and first of all, you honor us by the work that you do on behalf of the Palestinian people. Your daughter honored Palestine in the ultimate sacrifice, and I just want to thank you all for that. We've had a lot of hands up. There's a lot of people that want to ask, and we've had a lot of questions here. So I think what we're going to do is start by taking some of the questions, and we'll be watching the time, of course. Our first question is from Hank 5. Hank 5, will you please come to the mic, give us your first name, where you're calling from, and a brief question for Cindy and Craig Corey.
Thank you. I want to ask a quick question, but before that I wanted to thank Craig and Cindy for coming in and for doing the work that they're doing. It's very hard because the balance between Israelis' needs and Palestinians' needs is very rarely totally balanced. It's usually one side or the other, and it's really a shame because really the children are dying. When I heard that Rachel was killed, it made me sick. It made me very, very sick, and I certainly join you in the grief. My quick question is that knowing what you know now, Cindy and Craig, would you still have allowed Rachel to join the ISM, or have you had any thoughts of that? I know it's mute, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. And thank you again for showing up here.
Of course, Rachel was a 23-year-old young woman, so as I look back on it, I don't remember her ever asking permission for doing that. She certainly made up her own mind, and like I guess many young people dealing with their parents then started figuring out how to break the news to her parents in a way. So there wasn't a choice for us. That was something that we just had to get used to. I think I'm proud of her dedication, and I know many members. We've met a lot of people that have worked with ISM and a number of other groups in Palestine. Certainly Christian Peacemakers comes to mind. Israeli groups as well. We've worked with the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions and Rabbis for Human Rights. So there are a lot of people that do this sort of work, and they all know that it can be dangerous. I guess I'm a Vietnam War veteran. I thought it might be dangerous. I certainly at the time would kind of hope that Rachel might have, say, volunteered for a soup kitchen or something. But of course, we weren't living with Rachel at the time. We didn't realize how much thought she'd put into this, how much study she'd done. So it was something that she certainly considered before she went there. I think at the end that, of course, I thought she could be arrested. I thought if she got in the way that, some large soldiers could simply pick her up and arrest her or something. When she got to Rafah and I heard her reports and other reports of what they were seeing there, that's when I got incredibly frightened because when you talk about bullet holes around the windows of houses in which children live, I simply consider that the Israeli military in the Southern Command, where I've sort of watched more of it, was simply out of control. And
they were out of control, especially in Rafah. There was a lot that was going on, Craig. We do have a call here from our 1-800 number. Caller, could you please give us your name, where you're calling from, and a brief question for Cindy or Craig Corey?
Thank you. I just want to say, I'm not interested in helping my live in California.
Could you raise your voice, caller, please?
Okay. Because I have two topics. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not on the federal housing of California, and I want to extend my deepest condolences to the Corey family and their friends. California has always been the number one issue on the professional's mind, and I want to say from without asking any questions to a grieving friend, and I want to understand why I can't imagine it. I imagine, I understand the grief that goes with loss of the society, especially in an unfair, when that's unjust fashion. I would have to see it as the case, so I understand. Would you like to? Okay. This is on behalf of me and my wife and my family. I just with the condolences. What I would like to ask you a question is, what do you channel this energy in our displeasure and our anger over success? How can we best channel it? How do we go about it? I'm talking a lot of websites for people to read about the Tibetan spirituality movement, and some people actually act on it. I'd also ask people to demand the facts from the
Thank you, Hashem. I'm afraid some people are having some trouble. I just want to make sure that the question is audible. Hashem is asking, first of all, he offered his condolences, and is asking, how do we channel the anger and the energy in a productive way in light of Rachel's and other Palestinian and Israeli deaths?
Thank you for your kind words. I want to give a couple of concrete things that I think people can think about. First of all, we are approaching the 40th anniversary of the occupation. June 5th will be the 40th anniversary of the 1967 war. There is a call to action nationally and internationally, and I hope that everybody that hears about this will start to think about what they can do on that day and find groups to connect with who will be out and bringing attention to the fact that this occupation has gone on for 40 years. I talk to people all the time who are not very connected to this issue, and when I say that there's been a 40-year occupation, they look kind of blank, as though they really didn't have a sense of that. So it's important for us to bring attention to it. There is a U.S. campaign to end the occupation. You can go to their website, which is www.endtheoccupation.org, and get information. United for Peace and Justice in the United States is joining them for a big event in Washington, D.C., which is on the weekend. I believe the dates are the 10th and the 11th. It's the weekend, the Sunday and Monday. The Monday will be devoted to lobbying in Congress, but the 10th will be a hopefully huge gathering in Washington, D.C. of people. And when I mention lobbying, one of the things that I persist with is trying to communicate with members of the U.S. Congress. And it's frustrating work, but I think it's essential that we do it. This past week, we had 2 Palestinians here visiting us that we brought, and it was actually an ISM organized tour of the United States. We brought Feryal Abu Hakel from Hebron and Mohammed Hatib from Bilin, where they are leading nonviolent resistance movements in the West Bank. And we had very effective events here in the Northwest with these 2 Palestinian speakers telling their stories. And we took them here in Olympia to our congressman's office. He wasn't here, but his staffer was, and for an hour Feryal and Mohammed got to share their video and their stories. And I was surprised at how many people here had no idea about the settler violence that occurs in Hebron, for example. And it was very important for them to share those stories. We've asked Congressman Baird, we took in a letter making some requests. One was that he would meet with Palestinian constituents here in his district, because when I met with our friends who are Palestinian and they were sharing some things, I said, have you told Congressman Baird? And they told me they had not. They had never told their stories, even though they have family members that are experiencing these things in Palestine. And so we are now moving ahead. I said if they were willing, I thought we needed to move ahead to have them meet with the congressman. That was one of our requests. And this is just an example of the kind of thing that I think we need to really work on, so that when votes are taken in Congress, our Congress people, they remember that we're back here, and that it's not just Palestinian Americans, but the rest of us who are connected to you and supporting you in all of this, that we're all there saying that they've got to remember what's really happening there when they take their votes in Congress.
Well, so you can see, Heshem, there are a lot of ways that we can channel this energy productively and in ways that will help nurture a possible peace process in the future. Our next question is from Kate from Australia. Kate, if you'll give us your name, where you're... Oh, look at me. Kate from Australia. And tell me where you are and who you're calling from. How do you like that, Kate? And give us your question, Kate, for the Coreys.
I understand. That's okay, Vixie. I understand you've got a lot going on. Yes, I am Kate from Australia, and thank you very much, Cindy and Craig, for coming and sharing with us. I've been looking forward to this this show for some time. My question to you is, how is the lawsuit in 2005? I read an article that you filed a lawsuit against Israel and the Israeli military, which I would imagine was unprecedented. And I'm just wondering how that lawsuit is progressing. Did you get it to go forward? That's my question to you. But I want to say to you that your daughter is an inspiration not only to Palestinians but to all humanity. She understood that justice against one person threatens the justice to all. And it's a great tragedy that that her death has had to occur in order to wake a lot of people up. I have to tell you personally that when I read about your daughter and about Rachel and the manner in which she died, and then the subsequent events, that absolutely got me very, very involved, more involved than I ever had been in the Palestinian cause. So her death was not completely in vain, and I know you know that. But that's my question. How is the case going? Did you manage to get, is it going forward, or has it been stymied? Thank you very much.
Sentiments, and I think you're absolutely right, really, about Rachel and her understanding of justice. And I think she's taught that a little bit to her father. Yes, we do have a lawsuit against the State of Israel, against the Israeli Defense Force, and it is moving forward. It is in process right now. So we instituted that in part because we could not get an investigation either by the Israelis into Rachel's killing. They did give some reports, but in the end of the day, their investigation, and they would not release the final report on that investigation to the U.S. government. But what we could see of it, even our government said it was not the thorough, credible, and transparent investigation that Prime Minister Sharon had promised President Bush. So our own State Department is saying that Israel did not investigate Rachel's killing thoroughly. And so through a lawsuit, we would hope that maybe we could bring some accountability, and we will have the ability to go through the discovery process and maybe get some more information from the Israelis. That is going forward. They have done several things to block it. The Knesset even passed a law saying that you had no right, neither Palestinians nor internationals had a right to sue for damages, and they made that retroactive back to the fall of 2000. But the High Court has overturned that law, and so we are now actually very actively in the process of moving forward. And we'll see where that goes and whether our discovery really can get much more information. But it has gotten some information from the Israelis. And
Craig, let me ask you something briefly. In light of the fact that, as you said earlier, there was never, even if it was an accident, there was never a, wow, you know, I didn't see it was an accident, we're sorry. There was none of that. The government is obviously actively blocking everything that it can possibly block. The report was never released to the United States. All of these things, do you believe that your daughter was murdered?
Well, I'm not even sure what the legal definition of murder is. I don't know for sure what happened. We do know that that those two bulldozers and the armored personnel carrier, when they were not able to disperse the people there that day, they retreated to the border because their standing orders are if you can't disperse the civilians around the bulldozer operations, you are supposed to leave. They were then given new orders to not let the international stop their work, and by the IDF analysis, 5 minutes later, Rachel was killed. So we know that they were able to see activists doing precisely what Rachel was doing before that day, and so when Rachel went out there and stood in the same place, of course, she didn't know the rules had been changed. Murder is a strong word. I think that when we ask for an investigation, have to keep our minds open on this. But I've had a Jewish attorney here in the United States say he would call it murder. So I think that the first, it's not so much the label, it's the behavior, and it's not so much about lawsuits or even criminal prosecution. I think that if you try to talk about justice, that I would prefer a model like it was used in South Africa, restorative justice. But in that, you have to find out first what happened, then you have to understand your own role as a part of what happened, and admit that to people, and then you have to somehow, Desmond Tutu would say, forgive. I found forgiveness a little hard, but I think that the bulldozer drivers killed a great deal of their own humanity that day that they crushed Rachel, and if they could come to understand that, I could mourn their loss somewhat as I mourn my own.
I can imagine. We have 2 more questions, and hopefully we can get them in before the end of our program. Our next question is from No Political Animal, an old friend to Pal Talk. No Political Animal, if you'll come to the mic and ask your question of the Corys, tell us who you are and where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Lily Joanne. I'm calling from Toronto in Canada. And first of all, Mr. and Mrs. Corey, it's a privilege to speak to you. You have my greatest admiration for coming into this forum and for doing the work that you're doing. Your daughter was only a few years younger than me, so my friends and I could really relate. And we discussed courage and the fact that we didn't have that courage. I would like to ask you, how would you like us to remember Rachel?
Well, let me just tell you, how she impacts me. Sometimes, because Craig and I are in the public arena a bit now, certainly than we ever were before, and sometimes even more than we're comfortable with, I think. But sometimes things come up, should we do this thing, or should we do that thing? Should we support this, or should we support that? And I find myself stopping often. And when I have a question about that, or when I sort of opt to take the safer route, sometimes I do stop and ask myself, what is the decision that Rachel would make about this particular thing? What would she have done? And then sometimes the answer becomes clear to me. I don't want to leave the impression, that she would, she said she wished she could have boyfriends and dance to Pat Benatar and do all those things. So she knew that we had to have fun and take care of ourselves, that we wouldn't always be out there on the front lines. But I think sometimes when we make some of the difficult decisions in our day-to-day lives about where to take a stand, that we can draw inspiration from a lot of different people, not just Rachel, but from people like her who have done that throughout history. I would ask one thing for people who are in the U.S. And actually in other parts of the world too. Our U.S. government, for all the effort that has been spent on going to Congress and so forth, and there's been a lot of it. My whole family has been involved really for 4 years. Still, the bottom line is that very little has been done to determine the truth about what happened to Rachel. I still think it's appropriate, and particularly this time of year, for people to send a message to their congressmen, to their senators.
Absolutely. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this off, but that is a perfect place to start. Send a message to your congressman. Let them know that the investigation must go on, and we need to know what happened to Rachel. Cindy and Craig, you've been wonderful here. I can't tell you again how much we appreciate you being with us. Next week's guest is Laura Poitras, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, who produced the Academy Award-nominated documentary about Iraq, My Country, My Country. Craig and Cindy, again, the People Speak have been honored to have you on the show. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Keep up the good work. We are very proud of you.
Thank you for having us.
Rock and roll. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. Rock and roll. You got AC, DC, and Billy Joe. The sexy Bangles and the Go-Go. Billy Idol and Georgette playing the music, breaking a sweat. Thank you for giving us rock and roll. Thank you for giving us the rock and roll. You got midnight oil, beds burning, and turning his wheel in the sky, keep turning. Ace of base, I saw the sign, Cyndi Lauper, time after time. Thank you for giving us the rock and roll. Thank you for giving us the rock and roll. Thank you for giving us the rock and roll. Def Leppard playing the Rock of Ages, ZZ Top with their hit stages, Golden Earring, Damn Yankees, Aerosmith, Pat Benatar, Bill Squire, Bryan Adams, Kiss, Crocus, and the Cars. Thank you for giving us some rock and roll. Thank you for giving us some rock and roll. You got Dire Straits, Money.